Do facts matter? How about fact checking? Do you think fact checking matters? Well, today we're going to discuss that since Meta has ditched fact checking for community notes. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, I think it's an important discussion to have in this world of mis and disinformation. And then in our Aware Much segment, Scott is going to discuss this recent trend of people from the US specifically. Let's just call that out
People
right
moving from the
now.
U.S. Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, they may be. I don't know. As of Monday, we'll find out. But people that are moving from TikTok to these TikTok clone apps called like one called RedNote, which is also Chinese owned. And well, why that may not be the best idea. Like you may be actually making things worse for you
Yeah,
by going
depends what
to
you
another.
enjoy or what you want. But yeah, let's talk about
That's
it.
right. Because, yeah, we have this potential ban of TikTok, which may be happening in the US. In fact, broken news, because I can't say breaking news because Kevin
Broken.
would yell at me, but
Okay.
broken news, the Supreme Court in the US just today is Friday, so before the weekend, they upheld the ban of TikTok. So
Wow.
who knows what's going to happen on Sunday, but by the time you listen to this episode, we may have more information. So
There you go.
good times in the US, Scott.
Yeah.
And I'll introduce my co-host. Everyone knows Mr. Scott Wright
Hey,
in the
folks.
cold region
The
of
Great White
Canada.
North. Yes.
Yes, Ottawa,
Yes.
the city that fun forgot.
That's what we call it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Every city probably has the people that
Yeah.
right, complain about it. But and I don't know how many cities have labeled themselves the town that fun forgot. But I heard that one about Ottawa many years ago.
Yeah.
It's a government town, right? Mostly.
It is. Yeah.
But we have a few universities,
You do.
colleges. Yeah,
You
yeah. So I
do.
mean, there's a bit of nightlife going on.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. But it's just funny. I have some colleagues that are in Canada or from Ottawa, and
Yeah,
I mention it to them, and they get a laugh out of that because it's pretty well
it's
known
pretty
there.
true.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about. Well, I guess I could say the city that fun forgot is a fact about Ottawa, right? Can we back that up with facts, Scott? I don't know.
Well, I
What
don't
do you
know.
think?
Let's get a fact checker and find out.
Yeah. Well, if you're on Meta now, there's no longer a fact checker that's involved in any of these facts. So this was a recent change that Mark Zuckerberg had announced. And of course, a lot of the news around this speculates that he did this because of the new Trump administration that's coming into effect here.
Hmm.
And whether you think this is politically motivated or not, I don't think really matters that much, but it does bring up the question of fact checking, and especially in terms of social media. Like, and you can think about anything, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily have to be cybersecurity related, but this applies to every type of,
yeah,
event or anything that's happening in social media. And community notes, if you're not familiar with that concept, this is something that was kind of pioneered by X,
hmm,
when Elon Musk had gotten
yeah,
rid of their fact checking people
yep,
that did this, third party or not. And then they went to this community notes, which I look at that as more like Wikipedia, right? Like it's crowdsourced
hmm,
fact checking, which in my opinion isn't always the most
yeah. Who has
accurate.
the most energy and persistence to keep their side, up to date?
Yeah, because I think it could be biased
Oh
one
yeah,
way or
yeah,
another, right? Just depending on who you have doing the community notes, wouldn't you say?
yeah. I'm sure they'll probably come up with some new term like there's flame wars between people in posts. There's going to be some kind of a war on the community notes, right, to keep it saying the things that you want to say versus what your opponents or people on the other side may say. But yeah, I think this is sort of being spun as removing censorship, but it's really
Yeah,
more removing moderation, right? I think
I
it's
agree.
it's kind of it's abdicating responsibility for moderating discussions to keep them from becoming divisive and polarizing. I know there's a case where you might argue that these platforms are becoming kind of like, I guess what they call it, a common carrier or something in legal terms, like the phone companies, phone networks. You can't hold the phone company responsible if a terrorist, uses the phone to plan their attack. But it's a little different when we're talking about persistent data, right? That lives and it's actually broadcast, right? That's maybe more the important point.
Yeah.
It's every broadcasting technology we've had up until social media had regulations about what you could broadcast because of the potential damage that it could spread quite widely.
Well, I know in the United States, we do have like Section 230, which does some of those protections, right, for social media companies where they're not responsible for what is posted. And I think that varies. It may vary across the world, I
Yeah.
think, in terms of laws and things. But I, I guess I look at it as like, you're right. It's a moderation issue.
Mhm.
And because a company has the right to dictate what is on their platform, I think it becomes like, do users want to put up with
Exactly. Yeah.
certain topics?
Yeah. It all goes to the value of the platform and who it's valuable to, right? So
Right.
in general, I think we could see a lot more misinformation, disinformation, intentionally incorrect information that if it becomes rampant enough, the value of the platform will decline for a lot of people that are using it now, I would think.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I also think it's a change in the way that we think about journalism these days of like, where do you get your news from?
Mhm.
And I think the traditional, people watching the nightly news or getting it from a newspaper, right? Those days are kind of over, to
Yeah.
be honest, right?
Yeah.
Like people go to Facebook to get their news. They go to TikTok to get their news. And you do run the risk of misinformation from bad actors or from people that might not have good intent or whatever, like, that are
Yeah.
running these social networks,
Yeah.
rich
Rich
people
people
that,
with big motivation to, spin things a certain way and
right, for
influence
financial
people.
gain.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
know.
And for the average company, say, what is the impact on them? Potentially, a lot of false information being spread about your business could harm your reputation and your operations, even if somebody advocates for a denial of service attack on your company, that what
Yeah.
recourse would you have there, right? And even if you're not even on the platform, you kind of need to be concerned about that.
Yeah. I think what we told people in the past, this is a really hard problem, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're
Hmm.
on politically or whatever, but I think everyone has to think about this in a way of, how do I do my own fact checking? Like, you can't rely on these platforms to do it
Absolutely. Yeah.
for you. And
Yeah.
so you have to do your own research. You have to be very cautious of what you read, what you click on,
Yeah.
and understand that information may be tainted in a way
Yeah.
that isn't
That's
going to benefit you.
It's a really good point, and it takes me back, certainly from my training, wearing my training hat, where we're trying to teach people how to evaluate, a phishing or a social engineering attack by looking at, taking a moment to step back and think about what you're really seeing, right? Is it real or not? And it's the same thing for misinformation or disinformation on social media or on your news feed, wherever you get your news from. If you see someone claiming something, to be true because they saw it in a certain news outlet or some media outlet, then you kind of have to keep yourself from reacting impulsively and accusing people of being idiots or whatever, right? You're not going to actually change people's minds by that. So, there's a whole new social dynamic that we kind of have to learn how to navigate when you come across people that are saying, well, I saw this, post and it's everywhere, right? So it must be true. So
Yeah.
I just ask people to tell me where they got that information from. And then I usually go digging myself to see where that information was taken from. And usually there's if it's something that I think is not believable, I usually can find where the weak link in the trust chain is for that news.
Yeah. And the last point I'd make too is just we all have to be very cautious with AI generated content these days. And it's going to be even easier to spread
Yeah.
this misinformation through the use of AI because it's going to become more. I mean, right now, like photos is an example. Like there's a lot of issues with photos being doctored and things like that. And through AI, and you can kind of see someone has 7 fingers, right? And like all these weird things. And it's a little easy to identify, but that may not be the case in the near future where
Yeah.
some of these things are going to get really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is going to be a huge thing and something I worry about.
Yep. Well, Scott, I think it's that time.
It is
Kevin's not
time.
here, but to giggle in the background. But we're going to
What
jump
time is it,
into
Tom?
It's Aware Much.
Thank you, Tom. So, as Tom mentioned earlier, there is this new social app coming out of China called RedNote. And it's being driven a lot by the fact that TikTok has been banned or was expected to be banned. And so people are looking for another place to go if they can't post their TikToks. So it's a combination of, I think, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, and Pinterest all rolled into one. And it allows for short pieces of user generated content to be posted and shared. But there's also, an e-commerce element of it, which is interesting, making it easier for people to buy things that they see in posts. And it also is community focused, sort of, I guess, like Reddit, where you can maybe have higher value ads, or maybe the ads will be more expensive because they'll be targeting particular groups. So you may not see as much virality. But certainly as the TikTok ban, rolls out, a lot of Americans are going to be using RedNote. But no big surprise that there are some similar privacy and security concerns with RedNote to those that we had with TikTok, being that it's owned by a Chinese company, and it's been already accused of heavily censoring sensitive topics like LGBTQ posts, things like that. What do you think, Tom?
I think a lot of people are just looking for that next thing, right? Because if TikTok is banned and there's probably going to be like a surge in people trying to use VPNs and other workarounds, right? But that's just not going to be sustainable for people. So I think there's going to be a resurgence in finding new apps, and a lot of these Chinese made apps they've been natural competitors to TikTok, seem to be leading the way. And it's interesting, there's kind of a great interest right now, especially in the younger generation. So thinking like Gen Z, in, they don't really care about the politics around why TikTok is being banned, right?
Yeah.
They just want to upload fun videos of their cats and share it with their friends, right? That's just the mindset. And it is kind of a anti-government kind of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of it doesn't matter. I don't think this is an American thing either. I think it's just a generational thing where, that younger generation is just not trusting the government when they say,
Mm-hmm.
this is bad for you. And so we're going to ban it because we could be giving all this information to China. I mean, you talk to any of the younger generation and they will just tell you, I don't really
Don't
care
care.
about my data going to China.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal to me.
Yeah, that's sad, unfortunately. I mean, I think it does take a while for any individual to kind of build up that, awareness of the risks from, long data from long ago coming back to haunt you. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, an embarrassing thing. I have nothing to hide, but as we've seen in a lot of different, posts, articles, stories, it's more about what control you're giving up and how the information might be pieced together to actually discriminate against you or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's just, we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of, I think RedNote is actually a play on some Chinese,
Yeah, it's called the Little Red Book.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which goes back to
Sounds a little ominous.
yeah, very kind of political and
Yeah.
pro-communism type thing. So I think you just got to be careful with this stuff. And I think that's why they are capitalizing on a younger generation that doesn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
Older generations in the US and across the world have cared about these things. But
Yeah.
I think it's that long-term, we just don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And whether you think this is freedom of speech thing, in the
Mm-hmm.
US of with TikTok being banned. And by the way, I had we go back to the episode of the prediction episode we did, and I had said that TikTok is not going to be banned.
Oh,
Like,
you're already wrong.
Well, no,
2 weeks in?
it's not yet. It's Sunday.
Oh, it's
Sunday
still, well, you got next week, right?
Yeah,
So,
Sunday is when the ban happens.
Yeah.
But I had said that Trump or somebody else is going to step in at the last moment and prevent this from being banned. So we will see if I'm right. But
we will see. I
don't
get my
think
popcorn.
it's going to get banned. I don't think it's going to get banned. I think there's going to be something, or it's going to get extended, or there's something's going to happen because it's just way too controversial to just ban it.
Interesting.
Opinion.
So I'm not as familiar with the U.S. Political process for this kind of thing passing. You say something was approved today.
The Supreme Court upheld
the
congressional, like, they put it into law. Like, it was bipartisan law that was banning TikTok, and the Supreme Court upheld that today.
So is there anything that still has to happen, like with the Congress or Senate, with respect to the ban, or is it's?
Well, I think Congress may be able to delay it. Okay. So if Trump or another politician can convince Congress to delay or change the law somehow, I think that's the only thing.
So I guess an executive order might be in order.
Maybe. I don't know. It's very sketchy territory. Like, those executive orders aren't always the end all be all, right? There still are some checks and balances in place. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But
well, either way, I mean, I think the freedom of speech issue is probably not going to be supported very well in the RedNote app. There's a lot of censorship going on there, which is almost the opposite of the Meta thing, where free for all. So if you plan to use RedNote, just keep in mind those potential privacy risks. Yep. And that's it for this installment of Aware Much. Now, Aware Much is brought to you by ClickArmor, the employee cyber confidence builder. And ClickArmor is a gamified and interactive cybersecurity training platform. And during the month of January 2025, if you're listening to this right after we publish it, we're offering a 50% off deal for new customers during the month of January. And as of the date of this podcast, you only have 2 weeks left. So please reach out to clickarmor.ca, or you could contact me, Scott Wright, CISA, on LinkedIn, and ask for your 50% January discount. Then we'll get you set up with a demo and a free trial. And that's it for this installment of Aware Much.
Thank you, Scott. It's hard to believe that we're coming up on the end of January. What the heck happened to this year already? 2025 is shaping up to be a crazy year so far.
Yeah.
Wildfires and you saw David Lynch had passed away.
I did not
the
see
director.
That.
Yeah, that was Rachel Tobac's favorite director.
Yes.
If you remember.
I remember that podcast. Yeah.
That's right, back in the day. So, very sad. But so with that, I think that's all we have time for today, Scott. So we will continue on next week, hopefully with Kevin. We'll see if we can get him back on the show.
Yeah, hopefully.
If he's not too busy. But for all of our listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thank you for watching or listening this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to get your podcasts. Visit sharedsecurity.net for merch, previous episodes, and more. If you'd like to help support the podcast, join our Patreon to get ad-free episodes and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.